Hello everyone and welcome to Light Channel. Today we are so blessed having Jonathan Gray with us from New Zealand again, and we are going to talk about has Noah's Ark been found? Is there more evidence? And we have done several programs with Jonathan before, and if you haven't seen these very interesting and informative programs, they are available on our YouTube channel. And as you probably remember, Jonathan got very interested in archaeology when he was quite young. And the first time he heard about Ron Wyatt and his findings, he was very skeptical. And maybe you are skeptical today. You know, when Jonathan was when he was hearing about Ron Wyatt first time, he was, very kind of skeptical, but still he didn't go around and talk bad about him and mock him of anything. But he was actually confronting Ron, and he was doing lots of research himself. And you can maybe wonder, how has Jonathan's life been afterwards? Do you remember how it was with Noah when God asked him to preach for 120 years that there will come a flood? You know, people, they were laughing and they were mocking and they were criticizing. And that has happened to Jonathan too. People have done that to him. But, praise the Lord, thousands and thousands of people who have been skeptical, they have found Christ. They have found that the Bible is true, and they have found a Savior and a friend in Jesus Christ. And that is what it's all about, to get to know God and to have our lives changed. And Jonathan has also been telling us that several times skeptical, honest people have come to his meetings, and they have said after they have heard all the evidences that their lives have been changed. And today we are going to talk about more evidences. We can ask, why is there still so much skepticism when there is so much evidence? Do you know that if people really believed in this, then the world will understand that evolution is wrong and the creation is right? And we have a Bible verse here saying about Noah that so that in the 7th month, on the 7th day of the month, the ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat. So it was not one mountain, it was a cluster of mountains, which was called the Ararat Mountains. So today we are going to see some scanning from the boat. And praise the Lord, more and more evidence is there for us who maybe, or for you, who might be a little skeptical. Let's pray. Father in heaven, we are just so grateful that you are our creator. You created this world in 6 days and rested on the 7th day and sanctified that day, Lord, to remind us that you are the creator. We are so grateful, Lord, for Noah, who had the faith to stay there by himself and preach the message he was doing. And we are so grateful also, Lord, for Jonathan and other people who are standing up, showing these evidences so that people who are skeptical to you and the Bible, and we pray, Lord, that those who are skeptical, that they will be convinced that there is a good God in heaven who loves them, who cares for them, who is soon coming back and wants to give them eternal life. We praise you, Lord, that you will be with Jonathan now as he's going to answer more critical questions about these findings. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Eva, for the introduction again, and thank you all again for joining us tonight on Light Channel Denmark. And as always, and during this webcast, we will continue our series entitled The Supernatural Discoveries, Miracles, and Enemies, which is based on, I believe, a very thick book, which I have at home, containing a lot of information, a lot of data. Thank you again for being with us, Jonathan, live from New Zealand.
My pleasure, Michael.
Well, this episode is tonight is going to be, as I mentioned before, a continuation of our previous episodes about the location of Noah's Ark, but as well a major emphasis on the scientific evidence that Jonathan Gray and others have been searching for, looking at, and scientifically tested during a lot of years. So, Jonathan, I'm going to ask you the question again here in the beginning. How many years have you been doing this research, especially on uh, the Ark?
Oh, since 1992.
1992. And how many times have you been at that location?
Oh, I've lost count. Quite a few times.
Quite a few times,
Uh,
right?
yes. The first time was with an Australian friend,
Mm,
Trevor Prestige, and we got shot at. We got arrested. We got searched. We actually had problems first time, and we realised how dangerous it is to
mm,
try to get involved in that part of the world, because between in Turkey is the Kurdish area, and in the Kurdish area, and the Kurds want independence and they fight the Turks. That's where the Ark is, and the Turkish people can get very upset with anyone who's found in the Turkish area who's from overseas,
mm,
uh, accusing us of being spies and so on. If you're
right.
thrown into jail, you might end up in a Turkish prison for the rest of your life. We were preserved from that, but with great danger of being
Mm,
thrown into prison while we were there.
mm. Well, why did you find? I know you mentioned this in your testimony, but I just wanna you to mention that again. Maybe some of our viewers haven't seen your testimony yet. If you haven't seen it, please go ahead. It's still on our YouTube channel. But Jonathan, you just mentioned that you've been shot at, which means that you could have been killed. So my question is, what made you risk your life for something which the majority of people on this planet they don't want to believe in?
Well, I guess truth to me is very important,
Mm,
and my love for God is paramount. And if I see people attacking Him,
mm,
that they're wrong in this. I want to defend Him. I want His glory to be lifted up.
mm,
And the fact of Noah's Ark being true does glorify God. It shows that He is our Creator. He's the
mm,
one who intervenes in world history,
mm,
and we owe our allegiance to Him. That's the whole reason for my getting into it, to
mm.
help others realize how wonderful God is.
Well, before you went there to Turkey, as you mentioned before, and Eva mentioned in the introduction, you knew about the location of the Ark, kind of. You've heard from probably from Ron Wyatt. Did you go there to see it for yourself, to convince yourself in the first place that this is for real, that actually Noah's Ark was found? Were you a skeptic before you went there, or did you already
Ye-
know? Yeah, please go ahead.
yes, yes. Actually, I was a skeptic at first, so I
Mm,
went to confront the man who was making the claims that he had found the ark.
mm,
And I spent a whole week in his house examining what he said was the evidence. And sure enough, it was getting very convincing. But just to clinch it, I had to go myself, so that I'm not getting this information secondhand, but I'm
hmm.
seeing it firsthand. There's nothing better than eyewitness testimony, and I
Right,
wanted to be an eyewitness.
right. But did you believe in the Ark before you went there? Even if you
Oh,
didn't
I
know
did
about the
believe in it.
location. You did believe, but you didn't know
I
where it was.
That's right. And I'd
Mm,
I'd read books by people claiming it was on Mount Ararat, and
mm.
that, of course, is partly why I was skeptical of Ron Wyatt's claim, because he was claiming it was not on Mount Ararat, but in the mountains to the south.
Right. And this is one of the questions tonight. We're going to dig a little bit. Well, you're going to one of the questions later these different locations, which we have mentioned before. And as I've been doing some research lately, there's still ongoing research still on different location, and that's quite amazing. But let's talk about that at a later point. Now, we had a pause about a couple of months in our webcast. Hopefully we're gonna start having this webcast at least once per week, if it's possible, in the near future. I understand that you have moved lately from your old house to a new location, and hopefully now you're settled and everything is fine.
Oh yes, we're still settling, but the worst is over, and it's
Mm,
becoming a little easier now.
right.
Uh, the work, we tried to continue the work while we are shifting, but it's not. It's easier said than done. But we're happy now with where we are.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, let's go ahead and let's dig into our questionnaire tonight. So we are a little bit unsure if this is episode number 9, but nevertheless, if I believe it's number 9. Anyway, let's go ahead with the first question. And my first question, which comes from your very interesting book, is Only Rock. What about the 1960 Vanderman expedition, which found only rock at the alleged arc site? And before you answer, Jonathan, could you just please give our viewers, because I know this is a question out of context, just give a short introduction. What are we talking about? What is the Vanderman expedition?
Okay. Now the Vanderman expedition was based upon a photograph which was taken by a Turkish a pilot on
Hmm.
behalf of the Geodetic Institute of Turkey. He was flying across these mountains and photographing anything that might be there that didn't belong. And he came up with this picture he took of a boat shape in the mountains. And Life magazine published it, and it generated some interest because a boat could not, a huge boat could not be up in the mountains thousands of feet above sea level and hundreds of miles away. Uh, so, how could this be so? And this generated curiosity. And so the Vanderman group from the United States made a trip to Turkey to check out whether this boat site was indeed a boat or whether it was something else. And the expedition uh, was only there for 2 days. And what they did was to, we'll put that picture back up, I think, of the expedition itself, that black and white one. Yeah. Here they are. And that expedition was only superficial. They were not archaeologists. They were not anything else, more or less, but Christians who wanted to be witnesses. Now, when they got there, all they could find was it looked like a ship shape, but all they could see visible was the decayed lava that was now a layer of rich, fertile soil. And here and there, a rock poked up through the earth, and that was actually petrified wood, but the weathered condition camouflaged its true identity. And this expedition didn't understand what to expect. They were looking for an intact, real boat. Now, this team came and they dug hole after hole, finding only soil and clay and lava. And after 2 days, one member of the team says, let's blast a hole in the side and see if anything comes out. Well, that's not scientific procedure. But they saw nothing except what they thought was rock and soil. And they were very disappointed. And they went away saying there's no ark.
Okay, so what they tried to find, they tried to find out if this is really was the Ark, and as the question underlined, they found only rocks. They came back. This report is still available online, I believe. I think you're also referring to this report done by the Vandeman expedition, which is still available online, and it's still being used by some people to testify that there was nothing there, just rocks. So the main reason they didn't find anything was because of the lava, as you mentioned, right? Just to
Yes.
summarize.
The lava had disintegrated into soil,
Yeah.
very rich, fertile soil.
Mm. So the second reason, as we understand from the reports of this expedition, is that they didn't really go there as from, let's say, archaeologic point of view, and they didn't have any tools. They were just looking for to see if something is visible out there. Is that correct? Understood?
That's correct. They didn't know what to expect, and they didn't know how to interpret what they did see.
Mm. Okay. And well, based on, let's say, the goal of this expedition, it sounds like, I don't want to sound like we are trying to be smart here, but it was kind of doomed to fail. But at least they tried.
Yes, that's right. And as we go into this broadcast today, we will notice why the remains looked the way they did at that time.
Exactly. Yeah. And before we move on, I just want to ask you one more question in regards to the Vandeman expedition. Wouldn't be wiser to conclude, let's say that you are doing the same expedition, to conclude that you didn't find anything during this expedition, instead of concluding there is no Ark there? If you understand what I mean, because this is when I'm reading this report, they're stating, and it is being used, there is no Ark there because I didn't find anything, there is nothing there. So anyone else, don't bother to go there.
Yes, that's very, very sloppy research. It's not very careful.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, my next question is that other similar boat shapes. People have been claiming that there are other similar boat shapes in the same area, which is the Ararat Mountains, which means that the site you claim, Noah's Ark, to be is not really unique. And I have a quotation from an article from Creation Science that, however, this particular boat shape is far from unique. The Turkish Air Force released another photograph several years ago showing 3 similar boat shapes in the mud flow material on the foot slopes of nearby lesser Mount Ararat. And here I have a map where, according to Creation Science, this is a satellite picture, or I believe it's a picture taken by the Turkish military, where they are saying that these are possible location from the same site. What is your comment on this, Jonathan?
Well, it's very interesting that people who've actually gone to that area and checked on this, and a geophysicist from Los Alamos laboratories in New Mexico, USA, he actually was part of a team of men who went to these alleged sites, and what he said was that there are no true boat-shaped sites on Mount Ararat, not at all. And each year these have been published. They get touched up a little bit more to look like boat shapes, but they're not. They're fakes. They're not genuine. And people who are skeptics sometimes will bend over backwards and change what they see just to make it look like what they're aiming to be, and that's not honest research. And Ron Wyatt and Dave Fassold, who was a marine salvage expert, and others as well, went over to those sites and examined carefully what was there. And there are no real boat shapes on Mount Ararat at all, not one. But a picture that was bandied around by creation science was touched up. It was changed to make it look more that way. And each seemed like each year it was changing more and more into a boat shape. So it's not something you can trust. That claim is not genuine.
All right. So, well, the image, the map I have just had on the screen, it shows 6 different sites, which are still being claimed to each one of them showing a boat shape. Now, the site that you are emphasizing, and we believe that Noah's Ark is the one which is at the bottom in the middle. Is that correct?
At the bottom in the middle.
Yes. The site.
These are all on Mount Ararat. This picture is Mount Ararat itself, not the genuine location to the south, 12 miles south, further south, 20 kilometers south.
Okay, so the real location is not even mentioned on this map?
No.
No.
Right. What this is showing is Mount Ararat, not the mountains to the south. The mountains.
Okay. Well, I'm thinking that if all these people are claiming to have found the location of the Ark, you as an archaeologist for so many years, if you would be able to go again, let's say that you were going to start this from scratch, you've never been there, you're going to try to make a structure of your of the site, what would the first step be? How would you approach this? I know you've mentioned this before. I just want you to re-emphasize for our viewers, how is it that from an archaeology point of view, from a scientific point of view, and not just because people would say, well, you're biased because you're a Christian, so you're going to find it anyway. So which glasses are you going to take on? The Christian glasses, the scientific glasses, or actually they are the same glasses?
Yes. All right then. Well, first of all, I'm an historian as well. So I go to the history of Turkey, and I discovered that Mount Ararat is a post-flood volcanic mountain. It came up after the flood. It was not there when the flood was ending. It didn't exist for several thousand years, several hundred years rather, I'm sorry to say. It came up as a volcano and became Mount Ararat several hundred years after the flood. And that's understood history. Geologists in Turkey say that mountain came up as a volcano, and that if the ark had landed there and the mountain was already there and the volcano came up on top of that, the ark would not even be there. It would be destroyed by the volcanism. And not only that, if we go to the Bible, we find that the Bible says the ark landed on the mountains, plural, the mountains of Ararat, not Mount Ararat. The word Ararat actually is an anglicized form of the word Urartu, the kingdom of Urartu. It was a kingdom which is now part of eastern Turkey. But what the Bible is saying is the ark landed in the mountains of the kingdom of Urartu. And mountains, plural, of course, as we've found, is a mountain group of mountains. And Mount Ararat is not a group of mountains.
All right. Thank you for emphasizing this. So you are going to approach this from, first of all, from a historical perspective, gather all the information, the data which is available today. And from that perspective, you're going to take the next step and do the archaeological digging or whatever step you need to do to get to that point.
Yes, I'm not going to waste my time climbing Mount Ararat.
Hmm. Right. Okay. Well, the next question I have is coming up on the screen, a geological formation, because critics are saying, and this is still being pursued today. Recently, I've been reading articles from main magazines and journals that this is just a geological formation. Wasn't the streamlined boat shape formed by mud flowing around it geological formation? And your claim, and you are saying, but let me first read this quotation again from Creation Science, because they claim just as water flows around the rock in a stream bed, the site has acquired a streamlined shape due to the dynamics of the slowly moving material. Agridog is itself a volcano. The entire region is volcanic. In other words, the boat shapedness of the Duro Pinar site comes from lava flowing around and an obstruction not from Noah's Ark. Now, this is a very important point. And I mean, that's it. This is it. If someone can prove that this is actually just a geological formation, then everything else falls apart, right? Am I correct on this
Yes,
assumption?
that is correct. Yes.
Mm.
Now, the writer of that article in Creation Science magazine, Andrew Snelling, he should look at nature and he would
Mm.
know how water flows around a rock in a stream bed. And he would realize it doesn't happen the way we see the shape in the mountains of Ararat. If we could see a picture here of what nature does versus what man does, that may help us understand. Now, in the in the uh, left-hand picture, we have Noah's Ark. Now, when nature does something, it might be flowing down a mountainside, and it hits an object, and it fans out like the shape of a light bulb on the right-hand side, and then flows around the downhill and forms a pointed end at the bottom. Now,
Mm.
that's how nature does it. And you can experiment yourself with water and mud and anything you like, and you will find that the bulb shape, the wide, fat part, is always at the top. And the narrowing of the liquid coming down again meets and makes a pointed edge at the bottom. Now, that's what nature does. Nature does not do it like you see in the left-hand picture. The left-hand picture, the pointed part is facing up, and the wide section is at the bottom. Now, if you want to make it look like nature, you've got to hold the left-hand picture upside down. But what that means that the water has flowed the other way. The water
Mm.
doesn't flow uphill. Now, those two pictures, how man does it, man-made object, and how nature does it, are not the same. So obviously, the shape, where the shape is wide and where the shape is pointed, proves that the object on the left is not done by nature. It's a man-made object. Nature does it as it appears on the right-hand side. That's a very important thing, most important.
Okay. Right. Okay. Well, another claim which is being done by the critics is that this is again a geological formation. Why does it largely have the appearance of rock and sand instead of a boat? This
Okay,
is what the critics are saying.
all right, very good. Now, it should have the appearance of rock and sand. Now, when we learn more about the wood before the flood, the trees before the flood, there were no seasons as we know them today. It's the
Mm.
seasons that the rings in the trees. Now, before the flood, wood looked like stone. Now, a statement in the book Patriarchs and Prophets puts it very well. We've got a slide for that too. The trees far surpassed in size, beauty, and perfect proportion any now to be found. Their wood was of fine grain and hard substance, closely resembling stone, and hardly less enduring. Now, how wood was before the flood, it closely resembled stone. There were no growth rings in the wood. Now, this that insert picture we just saw a moment ago. Yes, there we are. There was the quotation I was reading.
Okay.
And yeah, I'll repeat it because it's a good one.
Yeah.
The trees far surpassed in size, beauty, and perfect proportions any now to be found. Their wood was of fine grain and hard substance, closely resembling stone, and hardly less enduring. Closely resembling stone means that if wood is petrified, it should look like stone. And the trees before the flood had no growth rings in them because a tree grows by the seasons, and that produces rings in the trees. But these trees from before the flood had no growth rings. Very important. Now, how did it get petrified? Well, as mineralized water washed over the remains of the ark, wood molecules, the ark was of wood, would slowly wash away, leaving microscopic holes. And as the water washed these molecules away, other molecules began to lodge in the empty holes. And these were molecules of substances which the water had picked up before it reached the structure that was being petrified. And the ship's structure would be literally turned to stone as its molecules of wood were replaced one at a time by molecules of minerals from the region above it. That is how it would happen. And that's just simple science. Well, when the Vanderman expedition actually went there, they said they found some very unusual stones shaped like timber with no growth rings. And so they thought there was nothing of archaeological interest. They did not know that the pre-flood trees produced wood that looked like stone with no growth rings. And their hurried trip, which lasted only about 2 days, could hardly be termed adequate. Now, with them, there was a man called Dr. Arthur Brandenburger, professor of photogrammetry from Ohio State University in America. And he accompanied the group and he made a statement. He said, I have no doubt that the object is a ship. So he did not agree with the other members of the expedition. He says, in my career, I've never seen an object like this in a stereo photograph. And in any case, when the dynamite holes were made by the team before they left, there came out what was the appearance of petrified wood, but they looked upon it as being stone. Well, it was stone. And so they said there is nothing of archaeological interest. They didn't understand that the wood before the flood was without rings. And so Noah, when he built the ark from that time, would not be using wood that had rings in it. It didn't exist. And that's what was found on the site by the Vandenberg expedition.
Okay, now you may hear some statements which I believe a lot of people are going to find non-scientific and very interesting, which together sums up to the growth rings, which you mentioned before, and that the pre-flood wood had no growth rings. Do you have any other scientific information, any other information that you could point our viewers to back up this very important big claim, because that's it, all the wood that have been found at the site in Turkey does not have growth rings. Is that correct understood?
Yes, that is correct. Now, another thing that I think can help back this up is that the coal we have today, the coal beds we have
Hmm.
today, are the remains of forests that were buried at the time of the flood.
Yeah, yeah.
And you dig down into the coal, you're digging down into the petrified remains or the coalified remains of what used to be ancient forests, and
Mm.
and none of that has growth rings in it.
Mm. That's a very interesting point, and it's a fact today. You don't hear that much about, especially this what you just mentioned today about the fossils that we have today and the wood and the coal, and don't want to go there in the fossil fuel industry, which is a worldwide industry and making billions all over, and unfortunately also a lot of worries around the world. Everything can be traced back to the pre-flood world. But
Yes, that's right.
of course there is another explanation for that from an evolutionary perspective. We don't want to go there. We just want to stay focused on the pre-flood wood, which you mentioned had no growth rings, and that's scientifically, as you mentioned, that's backs up with the coal.
That is right.
Mm.
Just an interesting side point, but not necessary, but I'll bring it out because of its interest. In coal mines, you dig down and you'll find the remains of buildings, remains of walls,
Hmm.
remains of people
Hmm.
buried and mixed up with the remains of trees,
Mm.
and remains of pots
Mm.
and technology.
Yeah.
And I think in our last broadcast we mentioned uh, technology like iPads and so on, which have been found down in the coal. So this was only done by a great disaster.
Mm.
No natural means would bury it evolution wise.
Mm.
Uh, some great catastrophe took place that buried man-made objects and nature-made objects altogether, and are now buried very deep in the earth.
Right. Because there is no other explanation, either from a scientific point of view, why would buildings and people, and you will find man-made tools or whatever which was man-made, being mixed up in a coal mine. That's very
Right.
hard to explain, I believe.
And cannot explain it because
Mm.
evolution does not allow for disasters. But we know that this great disaster did take place, and
Mm.
in coal mines today, and deep in the earth, you'll find these remains that I've just been mentioning.
Right. These are, Jonathan, sorry to interrupt the flow here, but you're making some very astounding statements on what you just mentioned. And you mentioned also last time about these iPad-like objects which have been found. And I want to underline that this is not a subject of tonight webcast, but you have backup information and there are books which you have written that people could get and could buy from you and from your website. If you could just mention that again.
Yes, actually, my website, www.beforeus.com, that's beforeus.com.
Mm.
And one book in particular that mentions the buried items buried by the flood is Surprise Witness. It's
Mhm.
part of a trilogy. The trilogy actually
Mm.
is 3 books. The Killing of Paradise Planet deals with a description of the pre-flood world. Surprise Witness, the events of the flood and things that have been found buried deep in the earth from previous civilization in the flood.
Mm.
And the final one is The Corpse Came Back, and this is the events that have been occurring in the natural world since the flood that were caused by the changed world after the flood.
Right. And just to mention, we've gonna get these books from you here at Light Channel TV in Denmark, and I'm looking very much forward to read your books and your studies. So back to our conversation about Noah's Ark. That's a very important point you just made, which is backing up the not just the theory but the explanation of why the wood looks petrified as we have on the screen. Why does it largely have the appearance of rock and sand? Why does this look like a rock instead of a piece of wood? And hey, we're talking about 4,000 years about later, right? or so.
Oh yes, that's right.
So yeah.
The picture on the left actually is a photograph of an object I've held in my own hands.
Mm.
It's a piece of petrified deck timber which is laminated. In other words, it has three layers, and those three layers are were stuck together
Hmm.
by whoever created the deck. In other words, three three layers of unrelated wood stuck together with a glue which can still be seen. In fact, the glue that joined the pieces together can still be seen oozing out but turned to stone likewise.
All right. And by the way, Jonathan, did you ever made any lab tests on these pieces of wood? Because, or you just left it there?
They have been analysed, and
Mm.
they show carbon, which is indication of a once living material.
Okay. So is that natural in wood today? If one would take another piece of wood or go to another archaeological site, would they find the same composition if someone will take a piece of petrified wood from another site?
Petrified wood should show that it was once living.
Mm.
Uh, the carbon relationship in there would show that.
Did the analysis find any other materials?
Material in the boat shape.
Yes, in that
Oh
pieces of,
yes.
yeah, yeah.
Well, actually, other things have been found, and
Mm.
these are. I think I may have mentioned them already. If not, we'll do it again. But the, uh, the petrified timber is there for sure,
Mm.
but not only that, but metal rivets,
Yeah.
which contain titanium, which is a space age mineral only used in our lifetime, really, by science. Titanium is one of them, and uh, there are mixtures, alloys
Mm.
made in a man-made factory.
Mm.
So that's a subject on its own. But
Yeah.
uh, yeah,
We covered this in a previous webcast. I just wanted to re-emphasize that the petrified wood, in my mind, is not just the only piece of proof or the object that you are using to prove that this is actually the site of the real site of Noah's Ark, but there has been a lot of other discoveries which we're gonna cover. We've covered before, and we're gonna cover in later webcasts. But let's stay with my next question, which is Constantine, because critics are claiming that this is a copy ark, which was done during the Constantine time, which is the Roman emperor. John Morris said on the one hand that his credentials as a geologist confirm it is a natural volcanic plug in a streamlined shape, and on the other hand that if it is found to be man-made, it is a copy of the ark built by the Roman emperor Constantine, right? And I'd like you to comment, first of all, one question that pops up in my mind: why, as you said, you're a historian, why would Constantine build an ark in the middle of nowhere in the mountains? Because that's really boggling me. Why would he do it? I mean, it's possible, right, that he could have done it.
well, I will make one statement only on this one. Uh, it was not possible for him to do it with the materials that we find there today.
Mm.
The metals of aluminium and titanium, which are the part of the remains of the ark, they were not in use in the 4th century when Constantine was alive. They did not have the technology to use titanium and aluminium, and that settles it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, then I guess that's it. And is that a historical fact? Can other people, can someone go back in history? Is there a book? Is there a place, a location, a link you can forward people to go and gather more information about the Roman Empire, what kind of materials they used, and why wouldn't it be possible for the Romans to build that ark in that location?
That can easily be checked up by going through. Go on the internet. Titanium and aluminium were not part of the technology of the early centuries.
Right. And this is very interesting again that we find these materials, and you have the lab test, right? You have the analysis, because I've seen a photocopy of this lab test in your books. You still have these tests, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, we do.
Well, another thing the critics are saying is that what about the theory that it is an ancient fortress, perhaps built by the Mongol conqueror Tamerlane in the 1300s? Is that also possible? Could that be possible?
Well, you know what? Objections like this, Michael, are made by people who've never been to the site. They don't know the contour of the land. Now, where the ark is down in a valley surrounded by areas, it's in the mountains of Ararat and the mountains surrounding. It was washed into this area, and above it, around it, there are higher pieces of land. So why would you build a fortress in a low piece of land where the enemy can stand higher up and shoot all over you? That does not make sense, and no ancient fortress has ever been built in a low area with hills around it. It's always built on the highest area where it has easier defense.
All right, that's a very good point, Jonathan. And if it was a conqueror, Tamerlane, if he was building that, he would probably never be a conqueror, making that big mistake to build his fortress where anyone actually could shoot at him. That will be a kind of suicidal strategy. That's what you're saying.
Absolutely. Just as you say, exactly.
Yeah, so that's kind doesn't really go with just not science but logics. Another question from our critic is that could it maybe be the remains of a Roman galleon or a Viking ship? Is that possible? If it's Noah's Ark, why not a Roman galleon or a Viking here from Scandinavia? Maybe a Danish ship.
Well, firstly, the size. The size of the ark remains in Turkey, compared with the size of an ancient Roman galleon or a Viking ship, no comparison of size. And another thing, how could you get the boat up into the mountains there? It's 6,000 feet above sea level, 2,000 meters above sea level, and hundreds of kilometers away from the ocean. How would you get the Roman galleon or a Viking ship up on your shoulders and carry it up into the mountains? Because there was no way the water would take it there. So it's a very silly objection, and objections like this are made by people who don't want to face the truth. They just want to destroy what they hear coming out, which confirms the Bible.
Well,
there is one boat that's mentioned in history that did go into the mountains, and that was Noah's Ark. There was no other boats in history, whether they be Viking ships or Roman galleons or whatever else. But there is a historical record of a ship that did go to the mountains, so why not believe it?
Yeah, well, since you mentioned that if that was a Roman galleon or a Viking ship, somebody would have had to carry it up there, right? That would be a huge task. Okay, and from the Greek mythology, Hercules, because I believe the same people which are making this claim that probably maybe it's a Roman galleon, they don't believe in the flood, right? So it couldn't be the water that brought that. If it was a Roman galleon, then somebody has built it there. Maybe that could be the other option.
Who but an idiot would build a ship up in the mountains if he couldn't use it?
Right. That will be a kind of crazy. Well, that's probably what they said about Noah We know that from the Bible, that he was crazy. People thought he was an idiot to build an ark. They've never seen rain. They've never seen water around. So I sense, how the skeptics are looking at it today. But anyway, let's look at the next question from our skeptical friends, because if the ark was covered by lava flow, then why didn't it burn up?
Well, lava actually has been known to flow through. This is lava from a volcano, has been known to flow through a forest without making the forest burn up.
Mm-hmm.
It's been known to flow through a town or city without burning up the city. We might wonder, well, how is that possible? Well, the fact is that lava has a film or a skin, a layer which is colder, which is harder, and which contains the very hot lava inside. So when the lava flow goes through an area, it doesn't have to burn up what it's going through, because the layer or the skin around it, which is cooler, just pushes its way through without causing any fire. And that's known to be a fact. Just get on the internet and see about lava and volcanoes.
Okay.
So it wouldn't burn up the remains of Noah's Ark if it was coming down the hill with Noah's Ark in it.
But it will cover it. That's what happened. That's your explanation. It did cover.
Yes, it has a cover that's not as hot as the interior.
So it actually, was it more like preserving the ark instead of burning it down and destroying it?
You've hit the nail on the head. That's absolutely right. It would preserve it. And then the lava, as time went on, would disintegrate and turn into very rich soil. And this is why the Vanderman expedition found this, because they were looking at a lava flow that had first of all brought the ark down, and then continued to flow over it for a while and bury it for a while. And so here and there they found pieces of jagged rock sticking up, which was pieces of petrified timber from the ark, but it just looked all very natural to them.
Okay. Well, could you just give our viewers just a short re-explanation, or just make a short story out of a long story? Because we know that Ron White, when he was there the first time, the lava was still in place and it wasn't really possible to do any research on the ark. So what happened a few years later?
Well, this is very interesting. Ron White went back to America to friends of his who believed in prayer, that God answers prayer. And they remembered a text in the Bible where Jesus himself says that we should have so much faith that our faith could move a mountain. And so they actually asked the Lord. They said, if Lord, this is your verdict, if this is the remains of Noah's Ark, would you please move the mountain rubbish away from the ark, so that the ark will be above ground and it'll be easier for us to examine it. They actually prayed that, and they prayed it for several months. And if the date is correct in my mind, it was November in 1978. And it was at 5 minutes to 11 in the morning. Suddenly, the sky, the blue sky, turned silver. And that was such an unusual event that all the people in the area in eastern Turkey looked up into the sky and they said, Mose, Mose. In other words, they were saying, miracle, miracle. Look at the miracle up there. It was so different from anything that happens in nature normally. A blue sky suddenly turns silver, and then when everybody is safely in their houses and there's no one can get hurt with the damage that may happen, the earthquake struck, and the earthquake moved the mountain and left the boat-shaped object high and dry above the mountain. The mountain on both sides slipped down, and the boat shape did not slip down. That shows the boat shape was not part of the mountain. It was an extra object that did not belong there. And that's an interesting fact. The mountain moved, but not the ark.
Right.
And the Turkish newspaper actually reported this as a miracle. No one was hurt.
Well, the reason
In fact, the owner of the land who lived in the village just up above says it came up and ruined my field, talking about the ark.
Wow. The reason I wanted you to bring this up is that because we have the expedition, the Vandeman expedition, which took place before the earthquake. Then at a later point, there were other expeditions, and as even today, as we mentioned before, the theory goes on, where the claim goes on that this is lava formation, lava could have destroyed it, and then people kind of settle there instead of going forth in time and take this very important event, which you just explained, the earthquake, into consideration to understand that from the Vandeman expedition till Ron Wyatt was there, and at a later point you came there as well. Were you one of the first to arrive at the site? Well, I know Ron Wyatt was there. Do you happen to know if there was another expedition going before you, in between you and Ron Wyatt?
Ron Wyatt took with him David Fassold later, and David Fassold was a marine salvage expert. In other words, he'd salvage ancient shipwrecks. So he was very good at knowing whether this would be a boat or not.
Right.
And Ron went back with a couple of other people, and they did some metal detector surveys and so on. And I came on a little later after that, but not too much later. And I got involved in really realizing what a dangerous thing this was to keep going back to Turkey. In fact, Ron had been kidnapped by Kurds. He was about to be killed, and by a miracle, he and his men who were with him escaped. So the whole thing actually has been attested by others, because I've taken others and they have seen what I'm talking about tonight.
Right. So this other person, the salvage expert, David Fetcher, did you say was his name?
David Fassold, yes.
Yes. What was his explanation according to his own measurements? I know you're explaining this in your book. I just want you to give our viewers an appetizer to get your book as well.
Yes. He actually said it was the size of Noah's Ark. Actually, just to make that more real, it's about 1.5 times longer than a football field. So it's quite a big boat.
Wow, right. Okay. Was he in any way related to Ron Wyatt, or as I remember, did Ron Wyatt just hire him as an expert to come to the site and give his own opinion, regardless
That's
of
right.
whatever Ron Wyatt believed?
Yes, and he independently had no relationship. He independently wrote a book later on called The Ark of Noah.
Okay. Wow. This is very, very interesting information. One of the last questions I'm going to take up with you in this webcast is this one. If the ark was covered by a lava flow, as we've been talking so far, then again, why didn't it burn up? You have a picture that explains, again, very clear, something really important. Could you just, again, re-explain what you've just, your sketch on the picture here?
Okay. Now, it didn't burn up, of course, because lava, as we mentioned earlier, has a film, a barrier around it, which is cooler. But what we do have here is the remains of upright and horizontal timber, which all joined up together with metal rivets, and which holds the pieces together. And all of this has been tested. the wood itself contains the wood sections contain carbon, which shows that they were wood, and the metal rivets contain titanium, which is a space age mineral only used in a very advanced civilization. And those metal rivets are in a pattern, showing that it was organized. And the inside the boat shape, but not on the outside. Inside, you've got all the pattern. You've got the materials, and materials are in a regular pattern of every so many feet in meters, and then radar scans got into the ark, and we can go into this another time, and showed that there were three sections, three layers. The two top ones had collapsed down toward the bottom one, but the bottom one is intact and perfectly shaped still.
Okay. Okay, well, let's move on, because you say in your book that much of the remains of the Ark has turned to stone, petrified, and shattered into sealed or sand-sized fragments. Does this mean that we should regard the remains as merely an impress of what was once the Ark?
Oh well, what has remained actually, the top part of the ark is what's turned to stone, or what has been where the molecules have been replaced by other substances, but the shape is still there. There's no question at all about the impress of what was once the ark, but the lower half of the ark is still intact, and there is going to be Turkish government has recently given permission for a actual dig, the first time any permission has been given to dig into the remains, to go physically inside what is left, and the scans that have been made are showing that there are hollows and rooms and passageways. That much is known to be certain, but no one has yet had an opportunity to go inside it and be part of the interior. And we're looking for that to happen very soon, and that's a wonderful development.
Right, and we cannot say that much. I surely hope that we will be one of the first channels to get the first informations from the digging. We are being in contact with the team, and as far as I know, and as you know, they are still waiting for the permit to start digging. Is that correct, Jonathan?
Yes, the permit has been promised them.
Mm-hmm.
But they first had to do some scanning, and the scanning now has been done, and so the process is quite a long one.
Yes, and it's going to be very, very interesting. I believe this is going to be, as you mentioned, the first ever on-site digging has never been allowed before.
That's right.
Right. Okay. Well,
but what's in the interior is known from the scans, and that's good. We're looking forward to the actual entry into the physical part of the ark that still is as it was in the beginning.
Okay. Well, okay. We've covered tonight some more information, some more data about the ark, what Jonathan has been describing for years in his very interesting books that you can get from his website. As he mentioned before, we're going to put a link in the comment field or on this webcast. And for our next webcast, Jonathan, you're gonna have some also very interesting evidence. Could you tell our viewers what are you going to present in our next webcast?
Oh, we're going to get into more of the physical aspects and and what I'd like to say, Michael, is that the physical aspects are sufficient that the governor of the province of Agri officiated at the site. He and government officials officiated at the site to declare the area an international historical park for the world. And there is a signpost going up from the main road, is near the border with Iran, and it points up to the Ark site and says Nuhan Gamisi. In other words, Noah's. So there is a road signpost telling people that Noah's big boat is up that mountain, put there by the Turkish government.
All right. Well, Jonathan, thank you very much again for being part of this program, and we're looking really forward to see you again on our next webcast. And
thank you, Michael. I've enjoyed being with you.
To our viewers, again, it's your choice to decide what you will build a life upon. If you choose to believe that this is for real, that this is really Noah's Ark, that comes also with a consequence. You will have to choose to decide for yourself and to believe in a flood, which means that the Bible is true and there is a God, which requires from you and me and all of us to have a moral, to have a standard, a way of living according to His will. And as always, here from Light Channel, remember your mind is the end target. Thank you and see you next time.